All right, Rabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. So we are continuing today in Osiod Beis in Tzidkas Hatzaddik to focus a little bit on the Rebbe's ideas concerning Teshuva. So remember again, yesterday, Rabbi Silber introduced us to the dramatic idea that the process of Teshuva very much mirrors the process of purification from physical tumah. Right? The same way that, again, one has to purify themselves from physical impurity, that process is mirrored in the purification process from spiritual impurity, which we call Teshuva. So the Rebbe said, remember, just very quickly, in the process of being mitar, in the process of purifying oneself from, let's say, for example, from tumah, the Rebbe said there are two parts. There's tara and there's kapara. Tara, purification itself, is achieved through two things: mikvah, tvila, and herav shemesh, setting of the sun. Kapara is achieved ultimately through karbanos. And the Rebbe posits that the process of tshuva really requires these two pieces as well. There is a tara, there's a tara piece. So we'll see. Now, there's a tara piece and there's a kapara piece. The Rebbe said really the way the Rebbe framed it was, in tshuva, there's two parts. There is a future-oriented part. I want to be different. I need to be different. I don't want to continue to sin. I want to live differently. I want to be better. And then after that, there is a rectification of the past. There's going ahead and going. Then there's a reconciliation with the past, a atonement from the past, which we'll get into now. So the Rebbe says as follows. See, he says, if we're on page Chaf Gimel in the Be'uriach Hasidus, the left-hand column, we'll start 3 lines down. V'zeu taima, v'zeu remes ha'pnimi b'kach, shetzarech ha'adam ha'tameh, kigon zavu mitzorah, shnei dvarim. Right, the person who's tameh, now we're switching back for a moment to physical impurity. So a person who is physically impure requires two things, says the Rebbe, in order to go ahead and fully purify himself from his tumah. What does he need? Aleph, tara. This is what we're going to focus on today. Today we're going to focus on the concept of tara, of purification. So what's tara? Like we said before, tara, utvila b'mikvah v'herav shemesh. So remember again, the purification piece, the tara piece, is served through immersion in a mikvah and sunset. So the Rebbe says something amazing. He says, Haromezes al tikun nafsho mikanu lahaba. So the Rebbe says that first part, what we call tara, is the future-oriented process. The future-oriented process. We'll say, even if you think about this, we'll talk about the imagery. The easier imagery to appreciate is herav shemesh, right? What does herav shemesh represent, right? What's herav shemesh? Setting of the sun. What does the setting of the sun really represent if you think about it? What does it represent? New day. New day. Right? Past is the past. New day, new chapter. I'm starting over. So the Rebbe says the concept of Tevila and Herav Shemesh represents what he calls Tikkun Nafsho Mikal Laba. That is the purification process. That's the part of Teshuva. That's the part of Tara that's future oriented. I was Tameh. As I enter into this new day, that tumah is behind me. There's a new chapter. There's a new chapter of life in front of me. Now the Rebbe says as follows. He's going to focus much more on the concept of tevila. So I understand that to rid myself of physical impurity, I have to go into a mikvah. Remember, bless you. Remember again, what the Rebbe is highlighting over here is the same process to go ahead and remedy physical tumah is going to be the same process to address and to remedy spiritual tumah, to do tshuva. So again, if I'm tameh, I need herav shemesh, I need mikvah. The Rebbe says that refers to the future-oriented part of tshuva. So herav shemesh, I understand. The old day is over. New day is ahead of me. New chapter. What about immersion in the mikvah? So the Rebbe says something so beautiful over here. He says, "Ayidei sheyitbal ha'adam v'yashkia es mocho b'mei hadas shu kinui v'remez l'Torah harochetzes u'mitaheres es das ha'adam." So in general, water, right? The concept of immersion in water is a fascinating idea, right? Why is it that water is always necessary for any type of tumah? right? It's just a fascinating idea. What is it about immersion in water? So Rabbi Silber has a whole beautiful piece about this where he explains that this the last time we did this but the Rabbi explains that water, he calls it the primordial substance. Remember again, what was the world at its beginning? Right? The world was water. Right? The world was right. It was water. Water represents the beginning. So when a person goes ahead and immerses in a mikvah and immerses themselves in water and allows themselves, remember again, that's why by mikvah there's no chatzitzas, right? You can't have anything between your body and the water. When you wrap yourself in the initial building blocks of creation, what you are effectively doing is beginning your own creation. You are recreating your own world. Reb Tzaddik understands a little bit differently. Reb Tzaddik understands that water is also an allusion to Torah. That just like water sustains and water, so too Torah sustains and Torah gives life. And therefore the Rebbe says something absolutely amazing. He says, in physical impurity, you go into water, right? You wrap yourself in water. In spiritual impurity, tshuva, what's the tevilah? The tevilah is in Torah. The tevilah, the immersion, is not in water for tshuva. The immersion is in that which is like water in Torah. A person immerses and envelops themselves in Torah. Now the Rebbe goes on, he says, V'hi tavlin liyetzahara, because Torah is the remedy to the Yetzirah. Kevan shi mevatelas es hirhure avera, because Torah has the ability to go ahead and negate even thoughts of sin. Vatorah nikres tam she mitavlaso. So this is incredible. Remember, we saw this. Gemara Maseches Brachos says that if a person is struggling with a particular Yetzirah, right? Person, what should he do? Mashcheu lebeis hamedrash, right? Kriyas Shema you get to afterwards. The first step is bring him into the beis medrash. Why? We know this. The truth is, when I learn Torah, I feel different, right? If you get into the psychology of chait, the psychology of sin is always quite complex. People sin for all different types of reasons. Sometimes it's gaiva and taiva. Sometimes sin is just an escape. Sometimes sin is a result of me just not feeling good about myself. But one thing is clear, that when a Jew learns Torah, by definition, I feel better. I feel different. Therefore, again, Rabbi Tzaddik is saying the tavlin, the antidote to the antidote to chait is Torah. So in physical tumah, you're going to immerse in a mikvah, water. In spiritual tumah, the process of tshuva, my water is Torah. I'm going to immerse myself in Torah. He goes on, he says, V'Torah, Osa ma'acharoi, shehovcho l'cheshek l'direi Torah, lios b'machane Yisrael. V'zeu hatara mitumas hazav hanavas mitayva, umilvad zos, Torah higam magna umatzli. Torah also protects the individual. Magina ala adam min yisurin, umatzilin also miyetzahara, shelo yachshilenu. Hainu shematzila es ha'adam me'averos kach, shelo yechta mikanu lahaba. So let's stop here for just a moment. So Rabbi Tzaddik is saying as follows, and this is really quite incredible. So remember, we're focused now on the future. As I mentioned yesterday, it is very incredible that in Rabbi Tzaddik's model of tshuva, the future part of tshuva comes before the past part of tshuva, which is really just a fascinating psychological dynamic. Because normally we assume that the first part of tshuva is kind of reconciling with my past, and then I can build a future. In Rabbi Tzaddik, it's actually just the opposite. I'm going to focus on my future, and then I'm going to, which just as an aside is really fascinating, because sometimes it's profound. Sometimes it's too difficult to reconcile with the past. Right? So if I have to stare down my averos and I have to actually make an accounting for the past, reconcile for the past, many times it's too painful. So people just choose to shut down the entire tshuva process altogether. The beauty in Rabbi Tzaddik's model is, let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the future. Back to the past at some point in time, but right now let's just focus about not what was, but what will be. So how do you go ahead and you plan for that future? Well, again, in physical Tumah, how do you plan for the future? Mikvah, Erev Shemesh, right? Erev Shemesh, new day. Mikvah, I need to go back to the primordial substance of creation, right? I need to restart myself, right? That Tumah was part of a previous chapter. Now I need to go forward. Okay, Teshuva, how does that work for Teshuva? Mikvah for Teshuva, Rabbi Tzaddik Paz Mikvah for Teshuva is Torah. Now, what does this mean? So it's like, again, sometimes, like, you hear this, Torah. I'm going to go on record. I like Torah, right? I'm a big fan, right? Sometimes people kind of just give it as like a glib answer. I'll learn more Torah. That's not, I mean, it is what Rabbi Tzaddik is saying. But understand this, what Rabbi Tzaddik is saying, it brings to the table. He says Torah has a profound cathartic impact on me. Torah protects me. Torah creates a spiritual bubble around me. And the more immersed I am in it, the stronger I am to resist temptation. That's what this is. The more I buffer myself with Torah, the more I'm able to stand up to the nisyonos of life. Doesn't mean I stand up to every single one of them. Of course not. Fail all the time. But the stronger you are, it's no different than a person who takes vitamin C. Why do you take vitamin C? I want to build up my immunity, right? I want to take a third booster shot, right? I want another booster shot, a third shot. I want to build my immunity. That's all I want. So if I want to plan a future, how do I plan the future? Meaning, and what I know is I want my future to be different than my past. I don't want to repeat the same mistakes. I don't want to engage in the same behaviors. I don't want to be the same person. So how do I ensure that that's going to happen? Torah. The whole idea of immersing oneself in the mikvah of Torah is that it builds back better, right? Ultimately, again, but really builds back better, right? It goes ahead and actually bolsters and strengthens the person in dramatic ways. Is it 1,000% assurance that I'm never going to sin again? Of course, the only time you get that assurance is when you're dead, right? Then you have 1,000% assurance that you're not going to sin again. But lamaisa, if I bolster myself, immerse myself in Torah, I buffer myself, I strengthen myself, so I'm better able to resist the taivas. All right, we'll stop over here for today. We'll, Meretz Hashem, pick up with the rest of Yud Beis, Meretz Hashem, tomorrow.